Hello! Welcome to Japan Outpost. I'm Yuko House. Today, I have another exciting story to share with you. Let's find out! So, can I have your name, please?
It's Damian Flanagan.
Hi, Damian. Thank you so
Hi.
much for today. I understand you published a new book, this book.
That's right.
So, that means you are a novelist.
Well, it's not a novel. It's,
this is
yes,
not a novel,
yes,
sorry. So you
yeah,
are
it's
a writer?
Yes, that's right, yes.
Ah.
It's the new book is a biography of Yukio Mishima, but it's also introducing quite a few new theories about Mishima, who is somebody who he used to be, I think for a long time, probably in the 70s and 80s, he'd probably be the person that if you were to ask someone in Europe or America, name a famous Japanese person, I suspect that the first person they'd be able to come up with is the name Yukio Mishima.
Oh, is that right? Oh.
Yeah, I think so. But both because his literature was quite famous, and obviously his spectacular death became infamous throughout the West. I remember when I was travelling as a student in Japan in the late 80s and early 90s, I used to be asked who is the most famous Japanese person in the UK, and I always used to say, and this was at a time when I had no particular interest in Mishima, I always used to say Yukio Mishima.
Oh.
In fact, I used to think he's probably the only Japanese that anybody in Britain could actually refer
because
to.
of the death, the way...
Well, particularly, you know, particularly that. There's been Hollywood films about Mishima, like Paul Schrader's film Mishima: A Life in 4 Chapters. So he was extremely well known. But that said, it seems like in the West that there's usually only just room for one Japanese author. And we've now entered the age of Haruki Murakami for the last 20 years.
Yeah.
So I think the number of people who are familiar with Mishima has relatively declined in the West, anyway. Although obviously he's still extremely well known in Japan, of course.
That's very interesting. Only one room for one author. It's very interesting. I agree. That's true. So actually, the fact you are researching on Mishima means have you been researching on Japanese literature? Yeah. How did it start?
Well, my background is I'd initially spent many years looking at Meiji period and Taisho period, which is late 19th century and early 20th century Japanese literature. But this time I really wanted to do something about post-war Japanese literature, moving into the modern age. And I think Mishima is the key figure to understanding what post-war Japanese literary world was all about, and he's just such a fascinating character, both somebody prolific in his writings, in the variety of his writings, but also an extraordinary as a human being, someone who managed to be not only a prolific writer, but somebody who was a lover of martial arts, a bodybuilder, a world traveller. At one point he conducted an orchestra. He flew a jet. So he managed to combine this incredibly exciting, interesting life with incredibly prolific literary activity. And then, of course, it all sort of funnels down to his spectacular death. And the build-up to his death, where in the last years of his life he becomes very politically active in a very radical sense of politics, and where his final day, which is known as the Mishima incident, is really Japan's JFK moment, where everyone in Japan, probably above the age of 10, in 1970 can always remember where they were when they heard this extraordinary news that Mishima and some of his cadres from the Shield Society had taken prisoner a general at the eastern headquarters of the Japan Self-Defense Forces, and that there'd been an incident which had culminated in Mishima giving a speech to the assembled army and then committing this explosive ritual suicide, ending in his beheading. So there's an enormous riddle which has stayed, I think, with the Japanese nation for the last 45 years of what happened with Mishima. Why was this man, who was at one point the strongest candidate to be the first winner of the Nobel Prize for Literature in Japan,
Yes.
how was he able to go from that to this extraordinary death? And there's been an enormous amount of things written about it. Everyone's got their theory about, did Mishima go mad, or are we to take his political beliefs at face value? Did he have a love pact? Was it the culmination of a life of sadomasochistic fantasies? And so on and so on and so on. All these different theories about what was behind the Mishima incident. So I just really wanted to look at all of that with fresh eyes and give what I hope is a completely new approach to the life and death of Yukio Mishima.
That sounds extremely interesting. Wow. So I understand before Mishima, you had other books on Soseki.
Yeah, one of my great loves in Japanese literature is the writer Natsume Soseki, who lived from 1867 to 1916. So a key figure at the beginning of the 20th century in Japan, and who is probably the most lastingly popular of all Japanese writers, and probably the most revered. So I'm a great fan of Soseki, and I've done a lot of years of research on his works at university in Japan. So the first books I wrote were very much engaged with Soseki. I also wrote, the first book I wrote in English, The Tower of London, was about, Soseki had lived in Britain for 2 years at the beginning of the 20th century, and that book really explores what Soseki's experiences of Britain were, how was that formative in his later writings.
I see. I can see these two books on Soseki are actually written in Japanese.
Yeah.
It's incredible. You are so fluent in Japanese.
Well, actually, I have to, this book I wrote myself in Japanese. This book I actually wrote in English, and it was translated into Japanese.
Oh, is that right? Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
So it's this is a book that you
Yeah,
wrote.
I wrote that one in Japanese, and this one is in Japanese, but I actually wrote it in English.
Okay, sorry.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
how come you are so good at Japanese?
Well, as part of being at, I was at Kobe University in Japan for 6 years. So, just as I just got used to producing papers and things in Japanese. So, yeah, it's just part of the gig.
Wow, good for you. Amazing. It's very impressive. So, what's the next goal or next activity?
Well, I've got more still to come on Mishima, because I'd like to write a book just about the Mishima incident. But the next immediate book that will be coming out is A History of Japanese Cinema, which is coming out next year. So it will sort of be a little bit of a shift for me from covering modern Japanese literature to going into the world of film.
Ah, it is a huge change.
Yeah, exactly.
How interesting.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much for today then. I look
Okay.
forward to your new book then.
Okay, my pleasure. Lovely talking to you.
Thank you.